Chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We are going to debate both the amendment to the Immigration Act, as well as the bill for an act to provide for the regulation of the fisheries resources as a compendium.
The lead bill would be the Fisheries bill?
That's correct.
Thank you, honorable member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It is an honor to have this opportunity to once again speak in this honorable place and to extend best wishes to the country at large, but certainly to my Marco City family, and to express to you my gratitude for this opportunity to be here, to be an extension of your voice and a part of the important work that you do every day to rebound from the negative impact of Dorian and the ravages of this pandemic, and to express gratitude to the Prime Minister for the opportunity to work in a pivotal area in national governance, agriculture and marine resources, and to salute the staff that continues to make sacrifices. Though they face personal challenges, yet they work on behalf of our wonderful country. And to say thank you to all of you and to all of the stakeholders. This morning, we discussed very briefly and more extensively in the wrap-up a bill for an act to provide for the regulation of the fisheries resources of the Bahamas, to provide for the long-term conservation, management, and sustainable development of fishery resources by the application of the precautionary and ecosystem approaches to enhance the livelihood of communities dependent on fishing and to meet the needs of future generations, to provide for the licensing of commercial fishers and fishing vessels, to deter, prevent, and eliminate illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing in Bahamian waters, and to repeal the Fisheries Resources and Jurisdiction and Conservation Act of 1977, and for connected purposes. Mr. Speaker, today is a proud day for many stakeholders who have in fact been laboring for more than 10 years to bring these amendments to this honorable House. Mr. Speaker, this is a collaborative effort, and I wish to say from the onset the obvious. Governance is a relay race. And the truth is, as I serve in this capacity, I am building on the work of previous ministers and those that work with them to ensure that we move our country forward in the right direction at a pace that will accrue benefit to the people that we serve. This leg of the relay, Mr. Speaker, brings to a conclusion attempts to modernize the legislative and regulatory framework that govern our marine resources. Mr. Speaker, this is not a race that completely ends here, for no doubt in a dynamic world there will be a need for additional amendments and future modernization. But today this is a culmination of extensive consultation. In fact, Mr. Speaker, over the last 10 years, there have been no less than 9 public consultations a series of sub-sector conversations about different aspects of our marine resources. And there have been numerous individual consultations by the Department of Marine Resources with stakeholders, with persons who had important recommendations or concerns about how this bill would affect them. And contrary to any public utterances that the public has not had any opportunity to participate, or any subsector an opportunity to participate in that, I wish to say that it is patently untrue. We have gone to great lengths to engage the public, and we are grateful, even in this place, to all the parliamentary colleagues, inclusive of members of the opposition and independents. We thank you for making the time for us to engage you, to answer any questions you might have. Mr. Speaker, this is an important move forward, but we say to the general public that we are not the only source of wisdom in this country. 39 can never consistently capture the collective aspirations and views of 400,000 plus people. And so we are open as your servants to make the necessary adjustments as you see it, which in your first look you may have missed. We are open to this input. So, Mr. Speaker, it is indeed an honor to have the opportunity to anchor this phase of this relay race to modernize our fisheries industry. Let me say, Mr. Speaker, that the components of our fisheries sector include the following: commercial fishing, and of course it includes land-based seafood processing and exporting facilities, the local recreational sector, the aquaculture sector, and the foreign/tourism or fishing sector, inclusive of fishing tournaments, open water sports fishing by licensed foreign pleasure crafts, and of course, the all-important flats fishing sector. Mr. Speaker, our nation sits within 100,000 plus. It's listed in a number of reports as 260,000 square miles of ocean. And we also possess additional inland waterways rich with marine life and assets that hold incredible opportunities for this generation and our children and grandchildren yet unborn. This legislation, Mr. Speaker, is a part of the combination to unlock the enormous storehouse of riches, of natural resources that are laid up for future generations. Mr. Speaker, let me put it this way. In this place, we are the gatekeepers. And since water is involved, the passageway to this country, to our exclusive economic zone, that is pregnant with opportunities for this country. And the question is, how do you unlock all of those opportunities? Well, a part of it is what we're doing here today with this groundbreaking piece of legislation. It is also done through policy decisions, programs, and projects. In this bill, we have a chance as a country and for the world to have a glimpse at the range of things the minister-led administration has been contemplating putting in place in order for this country, its residents, to benefit. Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas is a part of a regional network that is extremely important, but we are also a part of a series of international agencies. This, Mr. Speaker, as you would see in this presentation, is extremely important because where we sit geographically, the Bahamas marine environment is a habitat that services this entire region for many important and iconic species. And therefore, in addition to the steps we have taken nationally to protect the marine resources, we are mindful of the fact that these are interconnected oceans, and our policies, our legislation ought to be interconnected with those that exist in other countries, sub-regionally, regionally, and of course, internationally. And so, Mr. Speaker, against the backdrop of Hurricane Dorian, against the backdrop of a devastating pandemic that has wreaked havoc on global economies, inclusive of the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, all is not lost. There's tremendous opportunity for us to rebound. And our rebound, Mr. Speaker, is in part predicated on the performance of tourism and financial services, but the reality is diversification of our national economy is an absolute must. And this administration, as you would have heard from the leadership, is committed to making fundamental structural adjustments so that we are able to operate on parallel but interconnected tracks in order to bring all of our peoples along simultaneously. It would be tragic to emerge from this pandemic still narrowly focused on the twin engines of tourism and financial services, when opportunities abound by paying attention to a sector such as fisheries, though providing in the vicinity of 1% of GDP, has the potential to grow dramatically our contribution to national development, to dramatically increase beyond the 15,000+ persons who are employed in this sector full-time, and to dramatically increase our export of those particular marine products that's earning us in excess of $80 million per annum. Mr. Speaker, our spiny lobster tails is one of the three iconic marine species we have, the other being conch, the Nassau grouper, and it's difficult to conceive of a Bahamas where you are not thinking or associating those three products with the national identity of Bahamians. But the spiny lobster, Mr. Speaker, is a clear demonstration of successful species management, which has been accomplished as a result of collective collaboration between various stakeholders. This bill, Mr. Speaker, in part seeks to ensure that in much the same way we are sustainably managing, harvesting, consuming, and exporting the spiny lobster, that we can do so for the other species that are presently not exported, or those like the conch we have determined to discontinue exporting in just over a year. Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas' #1 edible export commodity, the spiny lobster, annually generates in excess, as I've mentioned before, of $73 million. However, this bill will clearly show that we have other opportunities in this sector that are underutilized and underexploited. The development of the fisheries sector is seen by many who have conducted studies in the Bahamas as holding the greatest potential for the immediate development of family island communities. Long Island, Eleuthera, inclusive of the keys that surround it, Andros, North and South, the southeastern islands, Grand Bahama, with iconic fishermen and fisherwomen from the east and from the west, from New Providence. Throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, we have an opportunity to develop our respective communities utilizing the resources available in our marine environment. Mr. Speaker, our mission is to develop the blue economy inclusive of fisheries, and the value proposition we believe, based on IDB studies, based on studies by the Food and Agriculture Organization, based on studies by CARICOM, we believe the value proposition for the Bahamas is in the billions. We must not miss this opportunity. With the coming into force of the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea in 1982, the Bahamas is responsible for regulating access to fisheries resources with the aim of ensuring the sustainability of these resources. Within the exclusive economic zone of the country, this access relates to fishing vessels and to fishers. Mr. Speaker, in many parts of the Bahamas, the commercial fishing industry plays a very important part in the development of those family island communities that I mentioned. Mr. Speaker, we challenge our young men and women to look at this sector and the potential that it provides for the national development of the Bahamas. This is an open economy that we have in the Bahamas. There are very, very few areas reserved for Bahamians. We must continue to demonstrate that we have the capacity, we have the wherewithal to develop and take advantage of our natural resources for the benefit of this generation and future Bahamian generations. We have lived for a long time in a country where we see the dominant industries often being controlled or dominated by persons who have traveled from distant lands to the land of our birth to realize their dreams, and not just for them, but for their children unborn. And while we welcome and we are in need of that cross-fertilization, we believe that we have an obligation to take charge of our economy from top to bottom, and the fishing and marine sector, the blue economy, gives us that opportunity. Mr. Speaker, it is also important to note the significance of sports fishing sector and the value of the tourism economy and how it benefits from our marine environment. Mr. Speaker, each year, no less than 25 tournaments are held principally on the islands of Bimini and Abaco. This, coupled with the development of the flats fishing sector, which is now taking place throughout our archipelago, bodes well for the economies of those communities and islands where these dynamic and profitable enterprises are taking place. Mr. Speaker, I wish to salute the association that has taken charge of the flats fishing subsector and congratulate them for the work they're doing with BAMSI in ensuring that we set up a national training program to bring a whole new generation into this lucrative area. The current Fisheries Act, Mr. Speaker, the Fisheries Jurisdiction and Conservation Act, came into force in 1977. Since its enactment, it has been subjected to numerous amendments in order to keep pace and to comply with the various international conventions to which the Bahamas has become party. Agreements such as the United Nations Law of the Sea Convention and its varied international plans of action. Also, the Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species of Wild Flora and Fauna, CITES, and the Cartagena Convention, and in particular, its specially protected areas and wildlife protocol. As you know, as you would recall, Mr. Speaker, that this particular protocol is dedicated to ensuring the protection of biodiversity in the Bahamas. Just to name a few of these protocols is to make the point that what we do in the Bahamas and what we're doing here today through these amendments is interconnected with what our neighbors are doing in the region and other countries are doing around the world. Mr. Speaker, the modalities associated with aquaculture management and development are also being addressed in this legislation. It's important to note, Mr. Speaker, that more than 50% of the marine resources or fish that we consume are in fact farmed nowadays rather than harvested out of the oceans. So aquaculture holds a huge potential for development in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and we have just recently approved 2 additional significant projects in this particular arena. We are also working very closely with the Grand Bahama Port Authority to make sure we create additional opportunities for companies locally and internationally that wish to reside in Grand Bahama in a particular geographical area to study the potential that exists in a variety of marine species. And so you're going to see an exponential increase in inward flow of investment in the Bahamas, companies, universities, foundations, non-governmental agencies that wish to become a part of a cluster of smart organizations working in a collaborative way to study and to assist this country in profiting from our marine environment. Mr. Speaker, furthermore, the country's most recent signing onto the UN Food and Agriculture Organization's agreement on port state measures to deter, prevent, and eliminate illegal and unreported, unregulated fishing on the 7th of October 2016, Mr. Speaker, this particular decision that was made by the country is a major leap forward for us. You would hear later in this debate by my colleague that IUU fishing has contributed to more than $20 billion in loss globally. The Bahamas is still in the process of documenting the impact of poaching, Mr. Speaker, on our marine resources. And so, Mr. Speaker, this bill makes provision for us in a responsible way to study the impact of illegal decisions as well as sensible decisions on our prospects for the future. Mr. Speaker, from its early inception, the Department of Fisheries, now the Department of Marine Resources, has been widely viewed as a law enforcement agency. After all, the department is primarily responsible for the enforcement of the Fisheries Act and its subsidiary legislation. The fisheries, that is jurisdiction and conservation regulations, allows us, Mr. Speaker, to govern how not just Bahamians but others behave when in our territorial waters. Yet in law, Mr. Speaker, there is no such entity as the Department of Fisheries or Marine Resources, or a Director of Fisheries and his subordinate staffing. In order to give a proper recognition of the department and its offices as the principal agency and individuals responsible for the enforcement of the Fisheries Act and its regulations, it is imperative that the department and its officers be afforded statute designation. This draft act and bill seeks to do just that. The review of the Fishery Resources Act of 1977, Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned before, began in 1986. by FAO. Mr. Speaker, we further extended the review, working in conjunction with CARICOM member states. The draft was further developed in 1992 through assistance from the Inter-American Development Bank. So since 1977, we have seen the draft bill undergo a number of important revisions. In 1998, a draft was submitted to Cabinet with a number of provisions designed to improve the government's ability to achieve its objectives with respect to commercial fishing. Mr. Speaker, we also had additional revisions that went beyond looking at commercial fishing and also examine how we might better protect the environment in general. The draft by IDB is considered the starting point for the review and was the basis for moving forward and the basis for bringing us here today. On the 8th of May 2013, the Department of Marine Resources began a renewed process in earnest to complete the drafting of this new act. The African, Caribbean, and Pacific Fish 2 Technical Cooperation Project played a pivotal role in empowering us to move forward. I've mentioned earlier some of the consultations that flowed out of each of these efforts. Mr. Speaker, the port state measures has been extremely important for countries within this region, and we have also sought to collaborate with the assistance of the Minister of Foreign Affairs with each of our neighbors in making sure that we harmonize policies, programs that we were putting in place, and also examine the ways in which we could benefit from best practices in the legislation of our neighbors. We are grateful to the contribution by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, in this regard. Mr. Speaker, we held an important workshop with a number of the law enforcement agencies in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, as well as with NOAA, with a view of ensuring that there was proper intergovernmental collaboration as we sought to implement the port state measures. Mr. Speaker, we believe have moved the needle in the right direction in terms of demonstrating how we must collaborate in the Bahamas if the marine resources is to be protected, managed properly, utilized for the economic empowerment of our people. And in this regard, I'd like to cite the important role played by fishers who have participated in any number of the consultations and workshops, and then, of course, the Bahamas National Trust, the Bahamas Reef Environment and Education Foundation, the Nature Conservancy, the Bahamas Commercial Fishermen's Alliance, all of them convened in the past to assist as we met with different stakeholders to plan the way forward. We're also grateful to the Office of the Attorney General and Dr. Judith Swan, an international expert in port state management measures, and who served as a legal consultant to guide the process of us implementing these measures. Mr. Speaker, this new act seeks to do several critical things that I wish to highlight. One, Mr. Speaker, it modernizes our governance structure. It promotes an integrated approach to the management, considering, Mr. Speaker, the rights of every stakeholder that benefits from our marine environment. The way in which we govern our marine environment, Mr. Speaker, cannot be tilted in one direction or the other. We must take into consideration those that are engaged in subsistence fishing, commercial fishing, recreational fishing, sports fishing. All of these partners are important. And we want to make sure in this legislation that there is ongoing accountability, transparency in all that we do, and that when we make decisions as policymakers, it is made on the basis of data, empirical data, rather than how we feel or conjecture or what the latest post may be in social media. We are committed to evidence-based decision. Mr. Speaker, this bill, further under the topic of governance, seeks to facilitate partnerships in co-management with fishers, non-governmental organizations, and other stakeholders. This bill, Mr. Speaker, is also committed to careful management of all of our marine resources, not merely those above the seafloor, but those that reside on and under the seafloor. It expands the fisheries management resources and ecosystems to also include inland waters, territorial waters, and our exclusive economic zone. So, Mr. Speaker, as you could see, this amendment goes well beyond what is resident in the present legislation. It is wider in scope. In addition, under the topic of management, we seek to collaborate with regional and international organizations on establishing international standards and best management practices. Mr. Speaker, a species that may be born in the Bahamas or in the Bahamas in abundance often migrates south. So we have a duty of care, not just to us, but to our neighbors to the south. And so we have an obligation to continue to form these partnerships. Mr. Speaker, we realize that we must continue to develop policies as we examine the adverse impact on our scarce resources so that we are able to mitigate against those negative impacts. And this is precisely why we have developed, Mr. Speaker, a list of measures to preserve the count. We recognize that the count is under threat, and therefore it is important that we insist upon having count landed in the shell, and we have met with stakeholders. We intend to move forward with that measure so that we are able to determine the maturity of the count, which can only be determined by the lip thickness, which you cannot determine when somebody goes and break out the count on the bottom of the ocean, leave a graveyard of shells, a foreign practice introduced in this country that we're going to bring to an end through this legislation. We also, Mr. Speaker, signaled to the public, met with exporters and indicated that we are going to end the export of count. And we have, over the last 2 years, going into the third year, gradually decreased the count quota. And so, Mr. Speaker, by 2022, there'll be zero export of count from the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And tourists can no longer harvest count in Bahamian water and consume. It will not be a part of the bag that they are able, or marine resources they are able to catch in Bahamian waters. And we've moved away, Mr. Speaker, from tourists, sports fishermen coming to the Bahamas, and every one of them having a separate bag limit. We are saying there's a limit for the vessel itself. So those loopholes that people use to fill their coolers and their deep freeze and sell, we are now closing those loopholes, Mr. Speaker. This bill, Mr. Speaker, also addresses the issue of climate change and looks at ocean health and the protection of biodiversity. It is important, Mr. Speaker, that those that are interested in this sector take a look at the IDB report, which clearly outlines a number of very important opportunities. Mr. Speaker, we are having a lot of discussion in the Bahamas now about natural resources. And just to mention, aragonite is but one of them. And Mr. Speaker, there are many. We are a big ocean state rather than a small island state. And Mr. Speaker, the reality is we have many species, marine species, that are not utilized. We've concentrated on, again, the three iconic species to the detriment of the Nassau grouper and the count. One of the points made in the IDB report, Mr. Speaker, is that we have an opportunity to explode the blue economy. The Ministry with responsibility for marine resources, working with the Ministry with responsibility for the environment, working closely with the Ministry of Transport, working closely with the Ministry of Tourism. Mr. Speaker, there are many opportunities in the sector in order for us to generate revenue for future generations. In fact, Mr. Speaker, we have incorrectly been valuing the assets in our country. It is believed, as a result of studies conducted, that our marine resources, if we were to do a proper valuation of what is in our waters, easily, Mr. Speaker, exceeds $6 billion US. So, Mr. Speaker, our marine protected areas, just to be very specific, the marine protected areas, right now we are at about 10% of our marine environment that is protected. It is our goal, preferably by the end of the first quarter, to have 20% of our marine resources protected. Minister Ferreira and myself are working very closely with fishers, with local communities, with environmental groups. And Mr. Speaker, within those areas, we have assets that exceed $6 billion US. So even when international agencies are rating us, are evaluating our worth, our value, we are missing an opportunity to give them a proper assessment of what's available. So this sector, Mr. Speaker, is extremely important. And we are going to make sure that it is protected from illegal, unregulated, unreported fishing, to make sure it's protected from oil spilling on these assets and damaging these assets, to make sure it is protected from poachers from the south or sports fishermen from the north, to make sure it's protected from persons even within our midst who might share GPS coordinates to friends and families and others on where the best spots are to harvest in the Bahamian environment. And so, Mr. Speaker, we believe that we have a marvelous opportunity through the development of the blue economy to explode the economy of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Let's look at a few figures. Military habitats to support lobster fisheries, 23.5 million in export value annually minimum, 6 million pounds catch annually. Vibrant tourism, more than 68 million in expenditure annually, more than 384 visitors in terms of days annually. So, Mr. Speaker, we have a marvelous opportunity to take advantage of this marine environment. This bill contemplates the Bahamas being one of those pivotal locations where we can have carbon storage for climate mitigation, Mr. Speaker. And so $5 billion is avoided in carbon emissions as a result of just the Bahamian waters. That is worth something in the international community. And that is precisely why we must be committed as a country to ocean health. And this is why this bill is extremely important. 400 million tons of CO2 sequestered in mangroves and seagrass annually, right here in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. So Mr. Speaker, we make a pivotal contribution to the global health as a result of our protection of our marine environment. This bill seeks, through its management practices, through its governance, through its climate change and ocean health, to do just that. In addition, Mr. Speaker, this bill, as I've mentioned before, this bill, Mr. Speaker, also assists us in the diversification into the blue economy, as I have said throughout this presentation. And the reason I continue to mention it, Mr. Speaker, is because unfortunately, we have become so addicted to dollars and cents that we sometimes miss the point that doing the right thing, going green as the Prime Minister had forecast when he was then the leader of the opposition, that there is an economic bonanza in doing the right thing, the green thing, and in this case, the blue thing. And so Mr. Speaker, the diversification of this economy is doable. This bill paves the way for the diversification of the Bahamian economy. Mr. Speaker, the other thing this bill does is it promotes the use of technology in us gathering the relevant data in order to make evidence-based decisions. This is why we're asking fishers to register. This is why we want vessels to register. This is why we want to put devices on vessels to monitor their movements, where they are located in Bahamian water. Again, so that we can make evidence-based decisions, not conjecture-based decisions, not social media-based decisions, not some folks who wish to clout chase by raising issues that we are already on top of. And so Mr. Speaker, it is important in passing this bill that we recognize we need from the subsistence, we need from the commercial, we need from the sports fishermen, we need that data, because we need to know what impact our fishing practices are having on each marine species so that we can manage it properly and we can govern our resources. Mr. Speaker, in true Baptist Pentecostal tradition, let me say as I close.
Go ahead, Rev.
There are multiple closing in that close, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the legal continuance of the Department of Marine Resources and for the appointment of the director, deputy director, and assistant director, Mr. Speaker, that's why this bill is absolutely important, because again, we want to give them, we want to make sure that they are encoded in statute law. Mr. Speaker, we also want in this bill to define and differentiate the powers between the minister and those of the directors. Many times ministers are engaged in minutiae, a lot of things that the technical staff has the capacity to do that ministers should not be involved in, and they can focus on policy, focus on finding the required resources, focus on making sure the persons who work in the ministry can finally get their promotion and be treated fairly and to eliminate anomalies. Those are the things we should be focused on. But the director has the capacity to do many other things. And so we want to make sure that we have a more nimble and vibrant public service, and this bill seeks to do that. We also want to establish an advisory council, Mr. Speaker, and a national fisheries stakeholder forum. We need all of those persons who impact our marine environment to meet regularly, Mr. Speaker. And so this bill clearly outlines the formula for doing that. And, of course, they would select two persons who would then serve on the council, which advises the minister. This then ensures, we're putting in law, in much the same way we did in the fiscal responsibility bill, Mr. Speaker, we are ensuring structurally that there is consultation throughout the country. Politicians often are elected and suddenly become the brain behind every single new invention in a country. So, Mr. Speaker, we want to make sure that that affliction does not plague us. And so in this bill, we're seeking to make sure that the sector informs the decisions the director makes and ultimately the decisions that the minister and the administration makes as it relates to their own things, their marine resources. And so this bill lays out carefully the establishment and functioning of a fisheries council and the National Fisheries Stakeholder Forum. Mr. Speaker, there is a requirement that every marine resources is carefully managed. In the same way we have done with the lobster, we have the Marine Stewardship Council designation, an international designation that allows us to have lobster sold in jurisdictions around the world, in stores around the world, because they are convinced through that designation that we are sustainably managing that resource. Well, similarly, we need that applied to other species. And so this bill clearly outlines how we get there in developing a plan for every marine resource that we have. All of our natural resources that intersect with this particular sector. And so, Mr. Speaker, you'll see a recurring theme in what we're doing in this bill that also appeared in other pieces of legislation laid earlier by this administration. And that is putting the onus on us to be accountable to the country by putting in law the requirement that we consult, that we come and report, that we have a plan that the public could question. Are you following the plan that you've laid out? So in much the same way we did it in the Compendium of Financial Services legislation, we're doing it also in the fisheries legislation. Mr. Speaker, I've already mentioned we have the requirement of the licensing of commercial and foreign sports fishing vessels and sports fishers. And, Mr. Speaker, again, that is about data collection. There'll be no additional cost put on your head of any significance. This is about data collection. We want to know who's out there, what they are fishing, how much they are capturing, how does that affect the stock, Mr. Speaker. That is the purpose of that. In addition, Mr. Speaker, there is the prohibition to foreign involvement in the commercial fishing sector. Mr. Speaker, let me say very quickly, I came in the chair in 2018, immediately met with a number of stakeholders, inclusive of a small group of commercial operators who, again, during that period, we signed off on a number of dive permits or compressor permits for their foreign workers to participate in this sector, or spouses of Bahamians to participate in the sector. But we made it absolutely clear that both administrations, the Progressive Liberal Party, the Free National Movement, for years, every administration has clearly indicated they had no intention on this being continued. We welcome others into the country. We would love for them to become citizens to fully enjoy all aspects of Bahamian life and all of the benefits that go with it. But we did not contemplate a continuation of non-Bahamians participating in the fishing sector, working on Bahamian vessels. Processing, yes. So this is one of the very few areas carved out for Bahamians, Mr. Speaker. And while I am sympathetic, I am deeply concerned about any business who feels that they would be adversely affected. My primary responsibility is to protect the limited Bahamian resources for Bahamians who right now are trying to eke out an existence, a livelihood in this country, Mr. Speaker. And we've consulted, we've met with them. I have on more than one occasion have clearly indicated what the intention was, and 1 year later, as predicted, we did not sign off on compressor permits. This year, we have followed the same practice. And just to give you a sense of how many Bahamians are using, or how many persons are using compressors in the Bahamas, we give out, I was saying to colleagues, 600 to 800 compressors annually, versus 40 to 60 in the best year, to non-Bahamians. And the technical team amended that recently. They said, Minister, actually, it's more like 1,000 compressors are given out to permits are given out to Bahamians. And again, last year, I think the applicants may have been in the vicinity of 40. So, Mr. Speaker, we believe that there are persons out there who are available to work. We have an obligation to go and find them, to train them. In fact, we're working with the Defense Force and the National Training Agency. We have established a national dive program, which conveniently was not mentioned in an interview I saw last night. And so, Mr. Speaker, we have a national dive program which is being expanded this year, so that we could create a cadre of divers that can work on these vessels. We have, through this budget that is in place, courtesy of the Ministry of Finance, have made available more funding than any other time in this country's history for small business development. Funding, grants as well as credit, or they can take an equity position in businesses. So, Mr. Speaker, for those persons who feel that they would be adversely affected because their business model is based on foreign labor, I want them to know we are prepared to work with them, to assist them in succeeding. When you succeed, this country succeeds. But in good conscience, Mr. Speaker, I could not make the case that one of the few areas carved out for Bahamians that I ought to lead the charge in terms of facilitating others who, through the simple act of becoming citizens, can take advantage of that. And so, Mr. Speaker, as I've said, even as we collect poachers in Bahamian waters, I am sympathetic to young men from other countries who are interdicted, but we have an obligation to protect Bahamian patrimony for Bahamians. And so, Mr. Speaker, I believe, and this is just an aside, Mr. Speaker, and some may wish I don't even mention it, but Mr. Speaker, I believe the country missed an opportunity in 2 referendums on the issue of making sure there's parity between Bahamian men and women. We missed an opportunity. The discussion of the Fisheries bill is not the next opportunity to relitigate that particular issue. That's not what this bill is about. And so I stand in solidarity with Bahamian men and women who deserve to have equal treatment under the law. This issue is about livelihoods for Bahamians, empowerment for Bahamians, the use of natural resources of the Bahamas by Bahamians and for Bahamians. And so, Mr. Speaker, on this issue, we are making it clear that we are not issuing divers or compressor permit for non-Bahamians, and we are standing ready to assist the handful of commercial operators who may experience some challenges in their business. We do it in other areas. If you lose some revenue because of the conservation recommendations, there are alternative livelihoods that we can work with you on. And we're saying, listen, there are many Bahamians out there, let's cultivate them. Mr. Speaker, the requirement for the use of vessel monitoring system on board commercial fishing vessels, Mr. Speaker, is well underway. In fact, a pilot project is being launched with a number of fishers, and that, Mr. Speaker, has in fact been funded. We're excited by that project. We want to let fishers know, we know you like to guide your special spot. This information is not to be shared. We are not sharing this with anybody else so they can find your special rock that have your tails every time the season, the lobster tails when the season opens. This is about just making sure we know where everybody is who are in Bahamian waters. And so somebody park in the Exuma Sea Park, we want to understand why you're there, because we know that through the metrics that we use, we are able to evaluate, did you truly have a breakdown? Did you pause long enough to do some fishing? Or were you just taking in the sights? So the vessel monitoring system is really to assist us. It is also to help you, that if you get lost, again, it keeps you safe as well. And so we're encouraging everyone to do so. We've had a relationship with neighboring countries that committed to making sure that this was on their citizens' vessels, like the Dominican Republic, and the minister is still working towards this end. We have not interdicted one Dominican fishing vessel that had a vessel monitoring system on it. But we believe that this would make a difference in the policing of them in their country as well as in our country. Mr. Speaker, this bill also makes provision for the proper management and development of the aquaculture sector using best practices, which I elaborated on. And in closing, Mr. Speaker, in the wrap-up, I'll elaborate more on this particular subject. And so, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I want to say once again a special thank you to the fishers who have labored long and hard in this country, who've waited for this day, for this bill to be enacted, who have spent a lot of time providing advice, assisting with the drafting. I also want to say to all of the non-governmental organizations that have played a role in the drafting and the editing and participating in the workshops, that we are appreciative of you. I also want to say to the Department of Marine Resources, the entire team, especially Mr. Gregory Bethel and Dr. Lester Gittins and Edison Delaveau, the entire team, for playing such a pivotal role in making this happen, and to the Royal Bahamas Police and Defense Force, who were part of those discussions, the Attorney General Office. I want to really go back and talk about the Defense Force. We have had, over the last 2 years, the largest number of interdictions of poachers in Bahamian waters, I believe, in the history of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And to say to members of the judiciary, we are so appreciative of you sending the right message to the public, locally and internationally, by the huge fines you've levied, that you see our marine resources as such an important asset to our future development, that you wanted to send a clear message to those violators. Also want to say a special thank you to the Ministry of Transport, which is an important partner for us in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. To all of the agencies, the media that continues to make known to the public the various initiatives that we have launched in order to protect our marine environment. And so, Mr. Speaker, I say to the fishers throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and if you would permit me to go home for a moment into East Grand Bahama, we want to say to you that we have heard your cries. And to the fishers in West Grand Bahama and in Freeport in general, Fritz Thompson, we want to say to you that we've heard your cry. And to those in Long Island and in Andros, Brother Boleg is here. Brother Boleg, Ricky Mackey, Hank Johnson, Adrian Gibson. Listen, they have, on behalf of their constituents, the Honorable Peter Turnquest, they are so, Michael, I mean, they have harassed their colleagues. They say, listen, if you could bring a suite of financial services legislation, you must be able to find the time to make sure that the fisheries bill comes into force. All of the Family Island members of Parliament, we hear from them. We hear from Picewell and Chester Cooper on a regular basis. They are concerned about seeing Cat Island get some good fishing waters. And of course, we have worked hand in hand with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who has been working tirelessly on the international arena, sensitizing our neighbors. In fact, it was because of the intervention of persons like Darren Henfield, who made sure that each meeting he's at, he is pulling his counterpart aside and saying, listen, we need your help on protecting Bahamian waters. And so the message has gone out. Some of the interdictions we've had is because other governments who previously were not cooperating with us in these interdictions have in fact cooperated with us. And so I want to say to all the Family Island members of Parliament, if I missed any of you, I just want to say I'm grateful for what you have done, for you raising this issue with us. West End and Bimini constantly, again, raises the concern of those constituents and want to make sure, she's looking forward to this vaccine working so that those sports fishing tournaments can get back in Bimini, get back in Abaco. So I'm grateful to all of you for your intervention. And of course, Clay Sweeting in the Senate has been a constant in terms of raising the issues with us, and we are grateful for the input that he's given. Mr. Speaker, I end where I began. Governance is a relay. And what we are doing now, as I stand here, I stand on the shoulders of all of the ministers of agriculture and marine resources who've gone before me. One of the reasons we thought it was important to consult with the opposition is, in every initiative we did in the ministry, is to get their buy-in or advice so that we don't miss anything. So that in the unlikely event of them becoming the government in another year and a half, that we have continuity. It is important that we ensure that there's continuity in good governance. And we believe that while this bill does not capture all of the matters, in fact, colleagues, I'm of the view that so important is the marine environment that we should enshrine in the Constitution that the resources are reserved for Bahamian use. It is my hope that we will come back to this place and put in the Constitution that fishing in the Bahamas is reserved for Bahamian, that we put it at that level, because again, 5% of our 200, depending on who you listen to, 100,000 or 260,000 square miles, 5% of it is land. 5%. 95% of it is water. So we have an opportunity, by the way, member for Kalani, given the size, the 95%, we think we should have an exponential increase in the budget for us now. 95% of the country is water. Rich ecosystem with biodiversity that not only serves us, but also serves the international community. And so with those few words, Marco City is honored to move this amendment to this bill, and we are looking forward at the end of this day to bringing this into force. Marco City, love you. God bless you.
Chair recognizes the honorable member for Marco City.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I know that the subject is not exhausted, but many of us are. So, Mr. Speaker, let me say in advance there were many questions and comments made that we will not be able to get to tonight. Tomorrow, I expect to be on one of the stations that had a show on last night. So on Thursday, I should be, I believe it is, on with Mr. Watson's. I'd be on that show, bringing the other half of the story, which was 100% missing the other evening. And so I would be able to address some of the issues that were not covered, that will not be covered tonight. I would like to begin this wrap-up, which I hope to be fairly quick, by addressing a couple of quick things. And one is to speak to the point raised by members from Fox Hill, Seabreeze, which is to celebrate the contribution of a number of Bahamian women to this important sector. And this is not meant to be an exhaustive list. This is just, again, just really to comment on just a few names. And to salute the work of Marla Johnson, who from the Law Commission has played, from the AG's office, played a pivotal role working with the NGOs, whether it's the Nature Conservancy, Brief, Bahamas National Trust, and with Mr. Bethel, Greg Bethel, Edison Delaveau, Dr. Lester Gittins, so many persons who have contributed. But Mia Isaacs, who works with Heritage Seafood and has played a key role in us achieving the MSC, the Marine Stewardship Council designation. Mrs. Jayette Burrows, Mrs. Michelle Roberts, Maxine Nesbitt, Mrs. Zelame Bear, Miss Samantha Smith, Dorothea Fox, Cassie Curry, Alexis Wells. There are so many women who are pace setters. The truth is that women make up a little over 50% of the population, and whenever they are missing in the discussions, the consultations, we are deficient as a result of it. Whether it's cabinet or whether it's parliament, I think we do better with less testosterone and more mothering instincts, more creativity. I mean, I'm told that women go to the door of death to come back and bring life. There's something that happens in that experience that makes them humanize some of the issues that we have not done a good job in humanizing. So I just wanted really to open, to say I stand with you And to my own mother, I say thank you for everything, Sister Laura Benson. And to my wife, our anniversary is on the 18th. I intend to fly home before coming back on Saturday to join my family in burying my brother. And to my daughter, who in this month, her birthday was on the 1st. Michaela, I absolutely, absolutely love you. And Mr. Speaker, several important matters were raised that I just want to quickly get to. The leader, opposite the member of parliament for Exuma and my father's hometown, Ragged Island, raised a couple of points. So just quickly, one is we have carefully considered the issue with respect to nationality, and this decision is a result of that, but we will leave no Bahamians behind. And so for those commercial fishers who are in the minority, as I mentioned before, close to 1,000 dive compressor permits are given annually, 1,000 to Bahamians. In the best year, I believe 60 was the ceiling to foreigners. So do some vessels still have a challenge finding employees? I'm not going to doubt their word in that regard, but I'm going to say disproportionately, the majority of compressor permits have been applied for and given to Bahamians. So Bahamians are out there working. Do we have a national work ethic problem? I would say it will be disingenuous of us to deny that fact. We do have a problem. So are there young Bahamians who would rather not be in agriculture or be in fisheries? I don't doubt that for a moment. That is an international problem, in fact, as we travel to conferences. But it is not my job. It is not my job to seek to replace them with others who, out of the challenging circumstances of their history in their country of birth, it is not my job to replace those Bahamians, but to inspire them. That is the mandate of national leadership. It is to sympathize with others who may be in a disadvantaged position, but to work diligently to create a cadre of Bahamians who are available to fulfill the roles that exist. And we also have the obligation to then say to Bahamians that you too, you have an obligation, we have an obligation to take advantage of our patrimony. It cannot be right that some maybe 30 to 40% of our population is unemployed, and I am seeking to use the limited time and resources I have pursuing others' interests. The truth is, many countries in this region, their waters are fished out, and everybody has to take a stand in protecting their country and demanding better of their own people. We in the Bahamas have a similar obligation, and so that is the stand that I'm taking. It is not a diss of anybody else. It is an empowerment of Bahamians. I make no apologies for that. But our commitment is to leave no Bahamians behind, and through SBDC and other financing mechanisms, we'll work with those commercial fishers. But let me also say, it is patently untrue that we have not consulted. We have consulted consistently with persons, and those that seek to represent that publicly are being more than disingenuous. I've met with them personally. We have had public sessions of consultation. We will continue to meet with them. I am your servant. I work for you. We work for you. You are our bosses, and so we'll continue to meet with you. But we have to act in the best interest of the greater good, with at the same time not ignoring what your peculiar circumstances are. And so we will find a solution. You will survive. That must be your confession. That is our commitment to work with you in this regard. Let me also say that we have worked quite diligently to look at the previous bill and to make sure this is an improvement. So with respect to Bahamians who are overseas wishing to participate in the industry, they can do so as investors. The fish processing or marine processing arena is wide open. And as I mentioned earlier, there are opportunities that they ought to take advantage of. But the present bill has the same provision, Exuma, that Bahamians who are overseas for a number of reasons are not permitted to participate in the sector in the same way Bahamians who are resident here. There are some potential complications there. We might later on, after evaluation, make an adjustment. However, at this time, this is just a continuation of a provision before. I would like to have further discussions with you on what you perceive to be anti-expansion. I believe this explodes the possibility in terms of businesses that are available in this sector, in the blue economy in general, not just related to marine products, but a variety of other areas. We talked about the opportunities in tourism. There are persons who are making more money showing people fish than catching fish. And so there are a whole slew of occupations there that we believe are possible. We mentioned the work we're doing with Prescott Smith and his team, along with BAMSI, where we're putting in place a national flats fishing training course, and we believe that that's going to pay dividends for Bahamians. The question raised also was, why are we not focused more on the mischief? I believe the regime of penalties clearly show we wish to send the strongest message to the international community and to Bahamians. It will not pay to engage in IUU or illegal, unregulated, unreported fishing. And so I'm asking Bahamians, the fines are onerous. These some serious money you would have, penalties you would have to pay. We have to behave circumspectly to make sure we are not caught up in situations. We also have to read, to listen, to make sure we clearly understand what is at stake when we violate Bahamian laws. And so we are focused on the mischief, I believe, in this bill, and we are focused on the penalties. We're also focused on enforcement. This cabinet has approved one of the largest hires, or in fact, the largest single hire of fisheries officers. Mr. Bettle and his team are diligently working on a cohort of fisheries officers who can function much like a cohort of Defense Force officers, police, or prison officers. So we intend to put in place a robust group of persons who are trained for longer periods of time, who can function as a force that will also, young people say strapped, but we really mean properly armed to handle conflicts that can potentially arise. Persons who are trained in a variety of areas in law enforcement. And so, again, Foxhill spoke about it. Critical Thinker, in fact, sent a text that coincided with it. We appreciate it. We've gotten so many recommendations from Bahamians while we were in here today. I agree with you in terms of anti-corruption. One of this particular member of Parliament and Minister with the responsibility for marine resources, I'm not an investor in this sector. There is a widely held view by many that too many ministers who oversee a particular portfolio have, as Golden Eyes have indicated, accrue unto themselves benefits that ought to be made available to residents. And so we are aware, anecdotally apparently, that there are a number of political figures who have participated in some of these sectors. I say anecdotally because persons make statements without bringing the facts, and so for me, that's irrelevant. If you know some things, share it specifically so we could pursue it. But I think it is important that we, when we hold these positions, we do not get involved in the very sector that we are in and expect to have a moral authority to speak to a public that's looking for us to create opportunities. Because I think when we came in, we knew what our income was going to be. We should try to work within those parameters to create benefits for others. So let's just make it clear. We are prepared where we find corruption to stamp it out. With respect to the strategic plan, several suggestions were made. We just want to let you know we are on track with those. One was that we should be teaching people engine repair. We have a program that is in place right now with the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, where we engage in trap making, vessel repair, as well as engine repair. So that's a program that's been funded by the United Nations. Secondly, BAMSI is working, as I mentioned, on flats fishing national program, and of course the NTA is intimately involved. So all of the suggestions that you were making are in train. We'll do a better job getting the word out in future. With respect to the yachts in Bahamian waters, we believe that not only yachts ought to declare in advance if they are bringing fish into our waters, but they have to report when leaving so that we are in a position to inspect what they are in fact doing. So I thought it was a wonderful suggestion that's already contemplated as well. And then with respect to catch limits have moved from individuals on these vessels to the vessel itself, and we're removing count from the bag limit. If you want count, go online and purchase the count. And we agree, enforcement is a key issue. The vessel monitoring system, again, that is primarily for research vessels. So we're not seeking to get a guy who has a 16, a 20-footer, and to put an observer on the vessel with him to see what he's doing. No, there may be instances where larger vessels who have been repeatedly accused of harvesting endangered species, there might be a need for an observer on their vessel, and they should bear the cost. But this is primarily for research vessels. We've been doing this routinely without incident. And then, of course, with respect to the council and the forum, all we're seeking to do is to embed in governance the consultation factor. Politicians ought to be making decisions that reflect the aspirations of the sector that they serve, and therefore having local forums that report to a council or make recommendations to a council that advises the minister is absolutely important in the governance structure. 400,000 persons collectively will often be correct where 39 may fall short. And so we want the widest possible consultation to inform our decisions. After all, we're here to reflect the aspirations of the people that we serve. And so the final point there would be that you would have heard Minister Ferreira talk about access benefit sharing, and that is when things are discovered in our waters, it ought to accrue benefits to us so that those products that you talk about, all of us can benefit from. Revlon or some other company overseas should not benefit from genetic material that comes from the Bahamas that we are not benefiting from due to its harvest. And so we have contemplated that in other pieces of legislation. This legislation harmonizes with that or works in conjunction with that. So there is synergy in what we're doing. We're talking with each other, working synergistically with each other in order to serve you better. And so just finally, I'd like to close on the point that my good friend from Angliston, an area that I grew up in fact, we lived through most corners in Angliston. We moved a lot when I was young. In fact, please permit me, since I know it's been a difficult day. When I was young, I went to Katie Josie Church, Church of God, Coconut Grove. And, you know, even moving out of the area years later, when the bus driver would come and pick you up, it was a humorous thing, but they would ask, where are we taking you this week? Because, you know, I live in a time where you pick up your house, you put it on the back of the truck, and you could actually move it. So by the time you come home in the afternoon, we could have been through Washington Street. By the time they come home from school, the house is through Jenny Street. You know, we moved a lot. But you made a point when referencing one of my favorite songs, which is Redemption Song. You made the point that the things that we do must cause the sector to flourish and explode. Well, one of the things we have been doing, and I won't go through it, but I just wanted to mention it. We've been putting in place a number of the cabinet papers that we've carried from the ministry with the help of the incredible staff there. We've always asked for the creation of an ecosystem. So we talk about an ecosystem of financing. So the sector is going to explode. There's a need for funding. So to the Fisher that you referred to me, 5,000 is not the limit for the grant. The grants can go up to 50,000. Beyond that, it could be blended financing, a combination of grants and loans or equity position. So we have been working, Darnell Pelicanos, Jerry Kelly and others, Brickell Pinder when she was there, who did an incredible job. We have been working with the Bahamas Development Bank, the Venture Capital Fund, BAIC, SPDC, so that we could work in tandem with each other and harmonize our approach to financing the manufacturing, agriculture, and fishery sector. We've also been working on an ecosystem for laboratories, an ecosystem for processing facilities, etc. So I'll just stop there just to make the point that, yes, I agree with you. We need an ecosystem to explode this sector and to take advantage. I would also say that we need cooperation across the political divide so that you give us your best ideas while you sit where you sit, and we then be responsive to take it on board in order to serve our people. So it's really been my honor to work with a team of persons, of stakeholders that have made this day possible, and we are open to any further suggestions in order to improve upon what we've brought here today. To all of the fishers, all of the stakeholders, we stand with you. We do this work as a labor of love on your behalf. Many of us, though this is a cut in salary to be here, the reality is this is what we did with our eyes wide open. So every day we are working on your behalf. And so we love you, we care about you. This is a labor of love for us, and we pray that you take advantage of the opportunities that exist, young Bahamians. Fish cannot die of old age in the Bahamas while you sit unemployed. You have to take the initiative. We could create the opportunities, but you must stand up and seize it. Leadership, I'm told, is only yours for as long as you're prepared to continually earn it. Well, opportunities can only be ours as Bahamians for as long as we are prepared to continually earn it. God bless you.